Welcome to BYOB. Today I have a podcast expert on the line to give you some insight into what it's like running one of these. And he's also been involved in my journey. He's recorded me many times, in fact, on his podcast not that long ago. So I'd like to welcome today the fabulous, the famous Chris Ashmore. Ta-da!
Oh, absolutely fabulous. Thank you, Andrew. Good to be here.
Now, I really appreciate you inviting me on your podcast a little while ago just to, catch up and to check in of where we are, because we have had several of these that we've done together over the years. We'll dig into that a bit later on. But you're doing your own thing now, which I love. I love. And I just wanted to give people a bit of a heads up on what that is, because, you're helping people do podcasts, which is fabulous. And we do a little bit of that, but we're more branding agency, and we rely on experts like yourself to help us out when we fall short. So if you want to give us a bit of a rundown of what you're doing now in your business and, a little bit of the ins and outs of it, that'd be appreciated.
Oh, terrific. Yes. So I produce podcasts primarily, but these days, just recently too, a lot of, with the technology that we've got, I also delve into the video podcasts. So with this technology, we've got it here today with Squadcast, is that you can be anywhere in the world and talk to somebody else, and you've got a video of that conversation. And, statistics are showing now that people are sitting down to watch these kinds of things. So, but my background is mostly audio production, and probably talk about that later. But, in a nutshell, I produce high quality podcasts because it's got to reflect your brand. So I do it for brands, for businesses, business owners, government, associations. So it really should reflect the quality of your brand. Yep.
And the name of the company, just, give us a shout out, don't be shy.
Oh, sorry. Chris Ashmore Media.
Yep. Very creative name. How'd you come up with that?
I don't know. Well, I could have called it, Purple Dog Media or something. Well, I've got that on my desk actually, Purple Cow, that book. But
that's a good book. Seth Godin, for those listening. Yes.
He's good. It is good. But then people would, I think, I am my business. It is me. So why confuse the market with someone else with a different wording when they're going to be dealing with me anyway? So that's the idea behind it.
As a personal brand guy, I go that's exactly what advice I give to people, because the SEO is great. I know you. I'd refer people to you by your name, even if you had a business. I'd just refer them to you. So
that's right.
It makes complete sense.
Yep.
So I love it. And having been on your podcast, very professional, and people should check that out. We'll put that in the show notes. Now, I did want to delve back to the day. I love going back into people's pasts and asking the first question, which is, what was your first paying job?
It would have been. I was a dish hand at the Kufstein Inn in Marysville, in central Victoria. So I grew up in the bush, and this is important. I think growing up in the bush in a country town. Nobody has all that much money compared to people living in inner city Melbourne or Sydney. But everybody's got a job, or those who don't have a job are running their own business. So as a kid, you kind of, your friends have all got a job working at, doing something, mowing lawns or working. And Marysville is very much a tourist town, or it very much was a bigger one before the fires came through about 15 years ago.
15 years,
yeah. There was guest houses everywhere, restaurants, all that kind of thing. So I was 14, and Mum's friend was managing the place, and that was my first paying job. Yeah.
See, I love that, and and this is why I asked the question, is because the roots of entrepreneurship are grown, when you're young, and I often find that it's these childhood experiences and the parental upbringing and the community they're involved in helps set the scene for their future endeavors. So. And then, so you grew up there, but you didn't stay there, obviously, because you were, you embarked on a world of adventure in the armed forces, I believe. Was that the first thing, or did you do something before that?
Well, I was a young Year 12 student, meaning I was born in April. So people born in February, March, April, May, you go ahead a year or you're behind a year. So I was heady year, if that kind of makes sense. So I finished high school when I was 17, and I remember walking around the streets of Hawthorne looking for a flat with me mate Michael Cox, two country lads, no car. And so first year of university, that was an expectation. Well, I don't know if there was an expectation, but
it's a Swinburne, right? You started at Swinburne.
Swinny, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I think early 90s, or just before the early 90s, most of the kids growing or going to Alexandra High School, in the 80s, they left school at year 10, year 11 and went on to do an apprenticeship. But it was sort of when Keating was in government, and that encouragement of most students at high school to go on to university. So that was there. So I thought, okay, well, always wanted to do journalism. And so I got in and I did a bachelor.
Why always? How does this always wanted to do? Like, where did that come from? Like, just fascinated with
from
media,
what I remember from all through high school. I was the editor of the school magazine,
Oh, really?
all those, those stories. Yeah. So I've always wanted to do investigative stuff and write up, other people's stories, I suppose.
So you're checking up who's smoking behind the shelter sheds and writing that up in the school newspaper?
That's it. Well,
busted.
Could have been
your
me
film
doing
camera.
That's right.
That's right. It's a selfie.
Exactly.
Now I have to ask you, this is completely off topic, but did you used to make mixtapes back in the day and sell them at school? Because there was always one at every school.
No.
There was one at my school.
No.
I did make an audio thing.
I made mixtapes. Yeah, I didn't think to sell them though. Maybe my entrepreneurial flair didn't kick in until much later. But
well, it's a journalism that was drawing your attention, I guess. So
well, that's it. No, it was that's what kind of drove me, and I wanted to get into media, but I wasn't entirely sure either. And there weren't that many focused journalism courses at university back then. I think there's heaps now. So I think I did apply for Melbourne University's journalism course, but I didn't get in. I wasn't one of the smart cookies to get into that. But so Bachelor of Arts. But as a country boy, I didn't like the city for the first year. I had no money, very little money. It was hard to keep, unless I wasn't living at home, so I couldn't, live off mum and dad kind of thing. So it was tough. And coming into the second year, I needed a break, even though I'd just done 1 year. And that's where the army sort of was calling. At the time, they had what was called a ready reserve scheme, which allowed, it was aimed, we were going through a recession then, and there was a lot of young people without work, and they were supporting those without work and university students, where you did 1 year full-time and then 4 years part-time, and they paid.
I remember that advertising. Yeah. It seemed like a really good program. Yeah.
It was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And there was hundreds thousands, I suppose, of other ones of us where we, so 1994, 1 year off, and 3 months recruit training like a regular soldier at Kapooka, New South Wales. My first day, incidentally, I fainted the first morning because it was.
You saw the food or something? Or
well, we were on a bus, and it was 16th of January, boiling hot. And all the nerves and everything. That night I couldn't sleep, and in the morning we had our first reveille where you had to get up at 6. Everybody get up, get out of bed. And I hadn't slept all night because I wasn't feeling well. And finally got to sleep, and then they woke us up, and then I'm standing in the hallway and I fainted. So
that's a good start.
It was a very good start to my career. But 3 months recruit training. I was accepted as a medic, so that I was in the Royal Australian Army Medical Corps, and did 3 months training as a medic at Portsea when they had the School of Army Health down there, and then 6 weeks training at a military hospital. And then we were all deployed all around Australia to Enoggera Barracks in Brisbane. For the next 4 years, every Christmas we went on a big exercise somewhere in Australia. We were based there in Enoggera. Yeah.
Wow. But you also went back and finished your studies, is that right? Or
that's right. Yep. So I did my second year of university. I took another year off and I traveled to Canada. I always wanted to go to Canada. So I deferred again, 6 months working in a pub in the Rocky Mountains, and then a few more months traveling through Europe. I've got relatives in Holland, in the Netherlands. So went and saw them and finished my third year finally in 97. So that was the education piece, formal education, because you never stop being educated, of course.
Yeah.
And then on
how cool is that though? What a great start to life. How adventurous! Like, I just think that's exciting.
It was, and I tell you, like I was just thinking about this before we went on. The 3 months recruit training, and you can imagine it's 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day for 3 months of learning how to do drill, so marching, learning how to pull apart and put together a F88 Aussteyr rifle, how to complete a bayonet assault course, how to do first aid with bullet shot wounds and all these kinds of things. I learnt more in my 3 months in the army, those first 3 months, than I did the 3 years of doing a Bachelor of Arts. Really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, uni's not known for its intensity of study. No. I mean, it can be hard, but it's
right. Yep.
It's not quite the army.
No, that's right. And then I don't know if I'm rabbiting on too much, so please stop me. But my last year of university, I had done some extracurricular activities. I went to Shep News doing some work at the Shepparton News and the daily newspaper and certain bits and pieces. But they had an advertisement for Business Essentials in Hawthorn, which is a company that produces business advice on, well, in those days, audio tape and then CD. Yeah. And today it's still going strong. I still produce it for them.
Oh, do you really? Oh,
Business Essentials. So,
mate, you should have had the one with me on the cover. That would have been even better. I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay. This is.
I think I was on the cover twice. I think I've had a dual.
Look at you.
The Man of the Year award. Actually, not that.
Well, it's 40 years.
40 years.
And 479 covers. 479 months of it. So you've been on 2 of 479. So yes. So there you go.
It's a great program. Like I remember going in there the first time, which is when we met, and I thought, geez, this is so professional. Like the sound booth, the engineers, and I was just like, wow, this is next level.
Yep.
And yeah, it was just very impressive. So highly recommend anyone and I've recommended quite a few guests to go on there, and I think it's a great business. So I'm pleased to hear they're still going strong, because I think it's great. Education. I'm a big fan of it. So
it is.
Yeah. So where did you see the ad for that? You said you were working Shepparton, and you saw the ad in Hawthorn. Was it on a street pole, or was it?
Well, part of the work experience at uni was to go to a newspaper or something. So I spent 2 weeks at the Shepparton News as part of that. So came back to Melbourne to finish off the last term or whatever. And, well, I've got to find a job. And so I went to the careers office at Swinney, and on the wall they had, and I've still got, I don't have it here to show you, but I do still have it in a scrapbook somewhere. The advertisement.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was for an assistant sound engineer, not for like a budding journalist. But I thought, well, I got to apply. I got to apply for everything, and I applied for that. Had an interview, and at the end of that year, and the person interviewing me said, "It seems like you're more less technical and more journalism." I said, "Yes, that's what I prefer." Well, we're going to be opening a position for a junior producer early next year. Would you like to apply for that? And I said yes, and it just fitted in with my last stint with the army as well. And I got that job as a junior producer. So that meant, and we produced not just Business Essentials, which was the flagship program, but we produced Business Essentials for pharmacists, Business Essentials for GPs, Business Essentials for AusPost, business essentials for the US and UK as well. So we had quite a bit of a lot happening. So I produced a couple of those programs, including the US and the UK edition. And basically we had journos in London and Washington, and they would do the interviews, bring them back to me in Melbourne. I'd put them together and we'd send them out back duplicated on CD in Washington and London. So it was it was good times. And the boss of the company, Michael Schilberger, he's famous for being the host of A Current Affair back in the 70s. We had former chief director of news at Channel 10 working with us, John Hounslow. Eddie Dean was former media advisor to Malcolm Fraser. So we had very high up, very qualified journos that I was learning from, old school journos of make sure you write like this and, clip over the ear. I remember when I started writing scripts, and John would have red pen marks all through it every time. And I finally got one script where there was no red ink on it. That was sort of gold that I'd finally made it, I think.
Put it in the scrapbook.
Exactly.
But it's an amazing, like, what I take out of that is you applied for everything. There was a job that wasn't quite suitable, but it led you to the job that was suitable. And I think that this is where some people struggle at the moment, is they're like, I'm looking for the perfect thing, And to be honest, this could be anything. This could be a job. This could be a house, a partner, or whatever. It's like, I have to have perfect. And it's like, but if you don't explore, you never get to that, because you don't know that one thing leads to another, and that's the chain of events. So, I think you've got a great sort of, coming to the right organization and having all these people to learn from, which you probably wouldn't have even been aware of when you joined. And all these opportunities came forth to, in your perfect area. So, and you were there for quite a while, right? Was it 17 years?
Well, no. I was there for 4 or 5 years. And then I had itchy feet and I went to Japan. I was going to go to Japan for 18 months.
Oh, that's right. You had that Japan. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, forgot about that part.
And of course I fell in love with the country, but with a particular lady. And we got married. I was in Japan for a good part of a decade. And I was a recruiter, a headhunter.
Oh, really?
So executive search recruiting. So for 8 years.
For Japanese people or?
Japanese, my industry was the legal industry. So Japanese lawyers. I recruited them into international companies. So, Amazon, Johnson & Johnson, the big Fortune 500 companies, they've all got an office in Tokyo, European companies. So that taught me sales.
That's a very different thing. It's
very different.
That's such a departure.
Exactly. Very. But I mean, that was great training for running my own business, really. I mean, you need to, when you're running your own business, sales is a huge component of it, whether you're 100%. In charge of just yourself or a team of people, if you're the owner. And so if you can allow me to indulge a little on what that meant and the difficulty in the beginning, it's like, you, as a recruiter, when you're starting out, you have a supermarket full of empty shelves, and you've got to fill those shelves with candidates. And so as a legal recruiter, I had to find legal candidates in order to go to a client and sell them to the clients, if that kind of makes sense. So I had to stock my supermarket, and we were expected, working for a recruiting company, to meet 100 people in the first 3 months. Sounds a bit like recruit training again. Those first 3 months were crucial.
Yeah.
So how do you find lawyers who spoke English? The only way was picking up the phone. So I would spend all day on the phone in Japanese. By that stage, my Japanese was good enough to infiltrate these companies like Toshiba or Sony and foreign companies. And I'd ring up pretending I was somebody else. So I'd give a different name, Kevin Bartoletto. So Richmond Tigers players. And I would explain, look, I was at this legal function 2 weeks ago, and I met someone in your legal department. He was about 30, 35 years old. He had black hair.
Japanese.
He's Japanese. in your legal department, is there anyone like that? And if you're lucky, they would say, oh, Suzuki-san. And you'd write down Suzuki-san. Oh, what was his first name? Yoichiro. No, it wasn't him. Was this someone else in your Sato-san? Oh, Sato. So you write all these names. So you got the golden ticket. You've got all these Japanese names from that legal department. And so I'd ring back 2 or 3 weeks later. You don't want to ring back the next day because it's like stirring a hornet's nest. They know this strange foreigner rang yesterday. Anyway, so you ring again a bit later, and I would ring as Chris Ashmore, asking for that particular person, Suzuki-san, and I'd talk to him in English to ascertain his English ability, but also say, look, I'm a recruiter and I work for some big foreign companies who would be willing to pay and meet you and pay probably twice what you're making. And through that, 100 phone calls a day, I might get to meet one person.
Wow.
So after
that's what they say in sales is why I don't like sales, because it's why we do the e-traction model instead of the, but in your situation back then, that was probably the only way to do it. I mean,
well, there was no LinkedIn. The Japanese certainly didn't use LinkedIn back then, and there was no other means to do it. So you had to. That's what you had to do.
That's what you had to do. That was your job. Yeah, 100%.
Exactly. So, and then once you've filled your supermarket shelf a bit, then you go and see a client. So then I'd ring the general counsel of, ABC company or whatever, and say, look, are you looking for a 30-year-old legal officer of this caliber? And they might not be looking then, but it becomes a numbers game. Then that a person will leave. A person's tenure in any company in Japan is about 5 years. So if they have 5 people in their
every year,
one of them's going to lose one. So it's a numbers game, and sales
sales is a numbers game.
It is a numbers game. Yeah.
So what took you to? So did you go to Japan because you met somebody, or did you go to Japan for a holiday and then met somebody?
My intention was to be there for about a year and a half, and then come back.
Teach English or something.
I taught English for that first couple of years.
And that's how you learned Japanese? Because I can't imagine learning Japanese at all, to be honest. It sounds so hard.
I think any language, I don't know how you could learn a language without being in the country where they 100%. Speak it, because you're immersed in it all the time and you're practicing all the time. So,
and you hear it just on the radio and TV, and
you hear it, but it's more the conversations that you have with people. You learn to I did have Japanese girlfriends who you'd converse. Wasn't just it was the language of love, of course, but it was also the language of Japanese. But I remember 18 months after being there, I thought I must be able to speak it proficiently enough, because I'm no longer carrying a dictionary around with me.
Yeah,
it was about the 18-month mark. I came to that conclusion. I'm speaking.
And how is it today? Is it rusty, or are you still pretty good?
少しだけ話せますけど my wife's English is better than my Japanese. At least when we met each other, my Japanese was better than her English. But being a gentleman, I help her out, and being a bit lazy. Yeah.
We're not there anymore, so it's what happens, right? So.
That's right. Yep.
So then you come back, and then what happens? So you come back, you haven't got a job again, so you have to go hustle.
So at this stage, our daughter's about 4 years old, and it's time to come back to Australia. The owner of Business Essentials, he passed away in 2010, but I had always kept in contact with the guys at the company, and his son now in charge. And I said, can I have my job back? And they said, yes, come on board. And there you go. So that was in 2014. Yeah.
That's easy.
Yep.
Can I have a job? They said, yep, back where, back in the homeland, which is a great way to settle back into the country, to be honest.
It is. Yeah,
you need that stability. You don't want too much variety all at once.
That's right. But it's interesting, though, because back when I first started all those years ago, late 90s, early 2000s, I mean, it was audio, cassette and CD. That's how people listen to this. Now, I hold it up now because there's still subscribers to the program who prefer this. Probably the older generation, if you can imagine, who don't want to stuff around with technology. But we do have an app, and more importantly, back in 2014, 2015 was really the start where podcasting took off. It just started to take off, and Business Essentials was well placed to produce podcasts for organizations that had money, which were, so in 2015, that's when we liaised with Officeworks. They were looking to produce a podcast, a branded podcast, and there weren't many other organizations that could do it for them. And so we got the thumbs up, and we produced a 5-6-part series for them called Paper Cuts. We had, REA Group, Magellan, the whole range of different huge, big organizations, the Aussie government, the small business department, they wanted one as well. So very well placed. We had a recording studio, expertise from wonderful producers, sound engineers, all that kind of thing. So it was really a good time to be back with podcasting taking off. Yeah. Yep.
And then this crazy thing happened when you wanted to start your own business. And I remember us talking about, doing training courses way back when. So what makes someone do that? Because you're comfortable, you're back in, you've got a young family, and you think, I think I'll just go ruin it all and start a business. how does that come up? How do you tell your wife, I'm going to start my business?
She's actually, that's one of the few things there. It's one of the important things, that she was on board from the start and has always been supportive. And that's important for many reasons, but she's not your typical Japanese, in the sense that in Japan, being a recruiter, often the reason why a candidate will not move to another company is because of family support is not there. And it's not the candidate making the decision, it's their partner and their family making the decision. So my wife, Takayo, has always been on board with the decisions I make. But the difficulty, of course, is that I'm the main breadwinner, and it's got to work. Whatever decision I must make, we're supporting a teenage daughter now, but she goes to a private school, and that's not cheap. So I've got to bring the money in. But as you can probably tell from my background, I can't sit still. I can't just sit still and let the world dictate.
You can for 20 minutes for the podcast, but
I'll tell you, I'm
half an hour. He's getting antsy.
I am a bit. So from university, I didn't do 3 years. I did a year, then deferred, a year, deferred. 4 years in a great job. I love Business Essentials back in those days, but I still wanted to see the world. So I gave that up, doing that, and then recruiting, and then back again. I've always got that itch of there's always something. I think I am a, glass half full person. There's always something that's going to be better. Yes. And as great as life is and work is, and I've always enjoyed what I've done, there's always, you only live once. My favorite movie is Dead Poets Society. So Carpe Diem, seize the day, all that kind of thing. And so why not? Why not has been the guiding philosophy for me.
Yeah. And so tell me about the transition. So did you plan it for a while, or did you just suddenly one day go, that's it, I'm going to do it? And then did you always know that it was going to be in the podcast sort of producer line? Was that always the thing? Could have been in other audio, ways.
It could have been. I've produced a couple of audio books.
I was thinking about audio books.
Yeah.
Do you still do that?
If I'm asked, I don't advertise for it. There's so much.
I need an audio book.
Do you? Okay.
Well, I'm writing my second book, and I didn't do an audio version of the first one, but I only listen to audiobooks now. I find it really hard to sit down and read. So, but I love an audiobook. I kill them off at one a month at least. So,
the audiobooks I've produced, so you can probably spend thousands, maybe even up to $10,000 to get it properly produced. What I mean is that you go. There's a few places in Melbourne where you do it, and then they put it onto a particular platform. So it goes onto Amazon, and wherever you get your audiobooks. Then people buy the audiobook with a credit. But for those who don't care to sign up for Kindle, for Amazon Books or whatever, then they're not going to access it. They can't access it. They can't get it for free. So a couple of my clients, I've said, just use the podcast platform, Spotify or whatever. So it's actually not tagged as an audio book. It's tagged as a podcast. But in effect, it looks and feels and smells like an audio book.
Yeah.
And they can
I just need the file. I'm a publisher, so I can actually publish the audio file. I just need the audio file.
Right.
So anyway, we'll talk about my particular needs later.
Yeah. Well,
but
for anyone who's
for the listeners.
For listeners, there's means to do it without having to follow exactly the thousands of dollars route kind of thing.
Well, and this is the thing is we only work with a few people doing publishing books. You know, like we help people publish books, we help people do podcasts, but that's not our expertise. We do it when they don't have another option. And we work with lots of our clients who already have a book from somewhere else or have a podcast from somewhere else, like yourself. But we do the overall branding, ongoing marketing of those things. And so, but if they don't have anything, then we work with them to do it. Right. And again, we're working with people who don't want to. They're not big corporates. They're not spending the 10,000 for it. You know, they want to spend 2,000 max. So it's a different market, and I think that we understand. You know, that it's different at our end, and the people we like to work with. And with that, tell me who you do like to work with. What sort of podcast do you like to produce?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? You get to, when you're running a business, and this is the beauty of having your own business, is that you get to work when you want, you get to work where you want, with whom you want, and how you want. And so we can talk about that later, but who do I work with?
I said it better myself. It's like exactly my philosophy. Yeah, 100%.
Well, the how is that you don't have to work from 9 to 5 and do it this way, because your clients, they don't care how you do it, so long as you do it and do it to this quality, if that kind of makes sense.
100%.
But I work with business coaches, medical associations, any associations with members, smaller business, government, but not so much the bigger businesses necessarily. And the reason is a lot of those bigger businesses are, I suppose, under the tutelage of agencies who prefer to do 8-week content marketing. And they do a six episode podcast, then they move on to the other thing. The important thing with podcasts, it's a wonderful piece of content marketing. It's not an event, it's a process. Like any good social media marketing, you just don't do, 6 social media posts and that's it. It's that connection. You do it over time, and it shows that you want to create a habit with your audience. So a thought leader or a business person, a business coach, for example, a consultant, accounting firms. I've got a number of accounting firms now, professional services. You want to provide information that you've got that others don't have, and build a habit with your tribe that you're targeting. So if you do it weekly is a good cadence, but it's hard to do weekly because it comes around every week. But fortnightly is a
You're
good
genius, Chris.
I am. Fortnightly is a good compromise. You can do 4 episodes in one hit, and you've got 2 months worth of content.
Yeah, that's what I do. I find weekly it does come around like, oh God, it's Wednesday, going to have another one out.
Exactly.
So it's we do that for most of our clients as well. We've got one client that was weekly for a long time, Dr. Luke, and he's like just a machine. Like he's amazing. But there's not many people who have that time. Well, he doesn't have time, but he just makes time because he's just a very high functioning person. But and you probably have those as well. But for most people, it's just part of their marketing mix, And you mentioned at the start the video is the new addition. I mean, the first 35 episodes or 38 episodes of Bob that I did pre-COVID were all audio and very lo-fi audio. We used to do it on just our own devices and now we're using this cool AI-based technology for video, and it's just adds another element. And I know you do that the same with your software. But it's just a nice addition to it, and you can cut it up and use it in content marketing.
I've come to the conclusion. Well, I watched a podcast recently where for service providers or professional services or whatever, 10, 15, 20 years ago, or even 40 years ago with this, for example, a lot of people were information poor. There wasn't enough information that they could get their hands on. And so if someone could package up information easily, and it still is relevant today in a sense, but with what I do, people are not so much information poor these days. What they are, they're time poor. And there's a lot of information out there. What they want is, they don't want information, they want implementation. And so what I do is I implement for them. I could teach them how to produce a podcast, and they would never be anywhere as good as me, of course. But they don't want that. A busy business coach, and they shouldn't be doing that. They should be focusing on what they do.
Yeah,
they're looking for someone to implement. And
yeah, I agree. Now, so what's your favorite podcast, I must ask? Being a podcast aficionado?
I always have a different one that I'm listening to. I'm a judge at the Australian Podcast Awards, by the way. I saw
that. I know. I thought I'd use that as leverage to get myself in there, but it's probably all the fancy ones that get in there rather than the lo-fi, real gritty business ones.
They're very well produced. These. When I first was a judge 8 years ago, I mean, they were bloody terrible. Most of the entrants and the winners as well. But these days, they're pretty slick. But to answer your question, my favorite at the moment is Chris Williamson. He's a podcaster in Britain, and it's almost daily. I don't listen daily, but he has deep. These are like 1.5 hour conversations with philosophers. Sorry. Yeah. He interviewed an Australian scientist on the differences between the biological differences between men and women, and are there big differences versus environmental differences. So these are kind of deep dive into things that you wouldn't normally read or hear about. Because I produce business essentials and I receive a business book probably in the mail every week from publicists, and I interview a lot of business owners. So all these, I've got shelves and shelves full of business books. I don't like to sit down in an evening with a wine reading a business book. Yeah. So, and the books I do get, I tend to flick through them for the interviews. I don't read the whole thing for an interview. So my podcasts, likewise, they tend to be more general knowledge, history, that kind of thing. Yep.
Yeah. I like Business Wars by Wondery. I listen to that, which is essentially very storytelling. It's like a TV show. They've got sound effects and they tell a story of, how Kodak started or how, the first car. I just listened to one about the early inventions of the aeroplane.
Yep.
And the Wright brothers versus this other guy who, Curtis was his last name, and he was really the innovator of all of modern aircraft things, but he was forgotten about because they sponged him from history. The Wright brothers had patents and they were so powerful, and I had no idea. And I just love those things. I must have listened to 50 episodes of theirs on all the things of how they invented the Ferris wheel and how the Heimlich maneuver, which is a medical thing to unblock your throat, like just all different variety. And I'm just fascinated with it because it's the innovation, it's the entrepreneurship, it's the how did someone think of that, and what lengths did they go through to achieve it?
Yep.
How'd they do Kellogg's cornflakes? And we all think that these things just happen, but at the turn of the century, when a lot of these things were invented, there was someone with a passion and worked their nails to the ground. Like they really put everything, and a lot of them lost and did not achieve the rewards. They did not get the monetary or otherwise awards or success. And that's what I'm fascinated about with sort of entrepreneurship and innovation is, why do we do it?
Yeah.
What do we? Starting a small business is one thing.
Yeah.
But going down to the nth degree to achieve something is a quest. And often there's no payoff, but it's the journey.
It is
the hero's journey of its worth doing because it's worth doing, not because it's getting something at the other end.
That's
and
right.
I think, starting your own business is a bit like that. You provide for your family and you do it for yourself, and it's safer to have a job, easier. But, we have this, I've got to do it. I've got to see if I could do it,
Yeah.
and I see that in you, right? So,
well, you asked me before, how did it transition into running my own business? And starting your own business is not like giving birth, where, you're pregnant at one stage, and then the next bit you've got a baby. There's this, mixing analogies here. It's like a ramp. You're ramping up to starting the business, and there's no real start or finish, or start of it. So I dropped my hours from Business Essentials to 3 days a week while I had these clients on the side, and those clients got bigger and the more demanding, the time and everything. And then so with my
very sensible.
Very sensible. So it's like you have a plate that's spinning, and which is your current employment. And of course, you've got responsibilities with private school fees and mortgage and stuff. So you need money to come in. So starting a business is this new plate just starting to spin. And once that's got its spinning enough, then you can sort of let that one go. And that was the idea for me. So I went down to 3 days a week. And then when I transitioned into, I had to run my own business because I couldn't market myself as Chris Ashmore Media while I'm still working for a media company. So I had to cut that umbilical cord.
Yeah.
Using
going back to that analogy.
One, and
not the plates. We're talking about the other one. Yeah.
Plates and babies and stuff. And so that, so I still work. I still do this. Business Essentials is still a major client, still bringing money in. But at least
You've done
now,
it the perfect way.
It was perfect. Yeah.
It's actually the way I tell people to do it. Like I've got a client recently, and she's all excited about what I'm saying she could potentially achieve in her business. And she's like, "Should I quit tomorrow?" I'm like, "God, no." Like, maybe a year or 2 years before you get your brand ready, you get your ideas, you figure out you build your client sort of brand reputation, all before you're not going to take their clients, but you need to build your assets. And
that's right.
Like you've built relationships. I mean, we've stayed in touch all those years, and I would definitely support you in a new business, and you've probably got hundreds of people like me, and that's the joy of entrepreneurship. And you've done it well throughout the journey, which means you had probably an easier starting point than someone who's just decided one day I'm going to quit my job and do something I've never done before. So.
Well, that's right. Yeah. And knowing and having that experience. So I've got both the creativity or the experience of producing podcasts at a higher level, and I've also got that experience of business development as a recruiter.
Because you can speak Japanese, which is perfect. Trifecta.
Yeah.
So handy.
That's it.
So let me ask you this. So if thinking back on all your time of running businesses and doing those sorts of things, what if there was someone who was like, "Oh, I'm thinking about doing it myself." What's the one piece of advice you'd give them? Start a podcast, or?
Oh yeah.
Besides that.
Oh goodness, that's a really hard question. It's you have got to love what you want to do. You got to love that particular, whether it's, I don't know, I know this sounds cliched, whether you're selling soap or making socks or whatever, you got to be passionate, I think, about that thing. See, I was quite a successful recruiter, if I do say so myself. I was, in the end, 8 years. By the 8th year, I didn't do any business development. I had clients, they knew who I was in the market, and and incidentally, recruiting fees are the highest in the world. 35% of a candidate's yearly salary is paid to the winning recruiter. So if a lawyer's on $200,000, the company pays the recruiter $70,000. So we're talking about big bucks. But I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I just, if I'm trying to sell you a pen, Andrew, I only have to convince you to buy it. I don't have to convince the pen to go to you to be your own. You know what I mean? So you're dealing with emotions all the time. And anyway, but running what I do now, I just love what I do. And and even though I said earlier, I can work when I want, where I want, with whom I want. I can work when I want, but I'm bloody working all the time.
Because you love it, 100%.
I do actually. Yeah.
It's a journey I take people on. It's really interesting. I get a lot of corporate escapees, I call them, and a lot of them recently have been like, oh, I'm really successful. I was a CEO or I've sold my business. So money's not really the issue.
Yep.
But then they're like, I've got knowledge and energy and I want to do something productive. Everyone wants to be productive.
Yeah.
So they come to me and we help them start a consulting business. And they're like, I just want to work a couple of days a week, a bit of here and there. I'm going to play some golf. They end up working harder than before because they get into something they actually love. They're like, I'm working with these people. I'm coaching this startup and I'm helping set up this board, or I'm writing, or they set up a new business.
Yep.
And because they're passionate and they love it, they go, it's not like, the bell goes at 6 a.m. and they're like, oh, I've got to commute to town for my job. Yep. They're like, it's their own business, and they can do it or not. And so, at the start, we were talking about how we're busy, but it's like because we put things on our own to-do list to do. No one's telling me I have to, like I said, write a book, or I've just signed up for another semester of university teaching, and I go because I can't help myself. I really enjoy it. So we do it to ourselves. But it's and passion's infectious, and that's the best marketing you can get. That's what I tell clients. That if you love what you do, that's the best advertising, because you put the extra effort in, the extra mile, and it comes across in everything you do. So, I think that's a very good point. Thought you were going to say podcast, but that's a better answer.
I mean, you still got to eat a shit sandwich from time to time. You still got to do things you don't want to do, and
but for me, admin,
well, that's
it counts
exactly. But that's life. You got to,
but they're minor things to my mind. I mean, enjoying the core and having a few things you have to do is okay. Hating the core is not, and having a few things that are enjoyable, like your lunch break, is not a way to live life.
No.
Enjoy the core. So anyway, you better leave it there because my producer will be on to me about the length. So
sorry, I know exactly what.
You can cut half of that out. So Chris, it's always great chatting to you. I could chat to you all day, and I'm sure we'll chat offline another time. But I really appreciate your words of wisdom and advice, and sharing your story, because it's always interesting to hear someone's journey and being so open about that. So I really appreciate it. So Chris Ashmore, signing off.
Likewise. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.
See you, buddy. Bye.